start the line. Yeah. Okay. So very good morning to all of you. Namaskar. Today we have a very eminent and distinguished speaker amongst us for the CSIR Summer Research Training Program, the SRTP 2020, and he's none other than Shri K.N. Vyas, the Chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, the Secretary of the Department of Atomic Energy. Namaskar, Shri Vyas sir.
Namaskar.
At the outset, let me just reiterate the genesis of this program. Actually, as you're aware, sir, that we were in lockdown, and every year a lot of students come to the portals of various CSR institutions and other institutes of eminence to undertake their sort of research internship, if I may use that word, and get some exposure to the research being undertaken in these federal government institutes. But this year, unfortunately, because of this COVID pandemic, we could not entertain them physically in our labs. So therefore, CSIR decided to start something called as the CSIR Summer Research Training Program. And this was also an offshoot of the fact that the Academy of Sciences, they also organize a summer research training program for students and faculty. And they also couldn't do as much this time. So with all this in the background, somewhere on the 1st of June, we opened our portals for students to come and sign up. And within 8 days, we got something like 16,000 applications from students from different fields. And it was overwhelming for us to see that how much they rely on CSIR for their higher education or for their sort of experiential learning. And so therefore, we have subdivided them into various sort of projects in which they will be entertained by various mentors. At the same time, we've also ensured that we get very eminent speakers almost on a daily basis to interact with them and so that they can get a feel of what it is all about in this country when we talk of a science and technology innovation ecosystem, and how this country is becoming Atmanirbhar, how we are able to, foster innovation in our institutions, various institutions, and what are the paradigms for these students as they move forward. So it was inaugurated. So this entire program was inaugurated on the 16th of June by our DG CSIR, Dr. Shekhar Mande. And since then, we've been having several lectures by eminent scientists like you. And I think this will continue for the next almost a month and a half, almost till September. We are planning to take it forward. And also the students have been allowed to join various institutions based on their interest. And these institutes separately after the lecture, during the day, they sort of engage with them through mentorship programs, through projects, etc. So this is how the entire program, it's a virtual program, but although it is virtual, we are still trying to see how we can show them some demonstrations of very high-end equipment, how they work, what are the principles, how do the results come. So kind of an experiential learning, but from a distance. And as and when the situations normalize, if it permits, we'll allow them to come to our portals or to our institutions, and they can actually see the labs physically. So with this small introduction of this summer research training program, I request my colleague Dr. Shastri, Director of NIES Jorhat, to please introduce today's speaker of eminence, Shri K.N. Vyas. Shastri ji. Shastri, you're muted.
Much for your introduction of the topic, and at the outset I would like to really thank Sri Kamlesh Nilakant Vyas, the top nuclear scientist of the country, the current Secretary, Department of Atomic Energy and Chairman, Atomic Energy Commission, and former Director of BARC, for sparing his valuable time to be with us to talk about societal uses of atomic energy. Sir, on behalf of all the students and the participants currently, which are close to 1,000 on live. We thank you for accepting our invitation and then gracing this particular occasion. For the sake of the students, I would like to say that the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission of India, is a post which was held by towering personalities, and currently Sri Kamlesh Nilkant Vyas is occupying this. It started by none other than Homi Bhabha, Vikram Sarabhai, and then H.N. Setna, Raja Ramanna, M.R. Srinivasan, P.K. Iyengar, R. Chidambaram, Anil Kakotkar, Sri Kumar Banerjee, R.K. Sinha, and Shekhar Basu. So this particular organization has made India proud, and we are all very grateful for everybody who is working in this great organization, which is driving India towards self-reliance in the independent India. Sri Kamlesh Nilkant Vyas is a scientist who had made exemplary and untiring research contributions in the area of nuclear fuel design for Indian nuclear reactors and strategic applications, thermohydraulics and stress analysis of critical reactor core components, and design and analysis of the test blanket module for International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor in France. And he carried out over a period of more than 3 decades, earned him to rise to the topmost grade of the distinguished scientists in BARC. In 2016, he was appointed as the director of BARC for his outstanding national and international contributions in nuclear energy. On September 21, 2018, the Government of India appointed him to the top position of Secretary, Department of Atomic Energy, Government of India, and Chairman, Atomic Energy Commission. Under his directorship, BARC, a successful commissioning of the 2 megawatt swimming pool type upgraded Apsara U research reactor was done in a record time. This reactor attained the criticality on September 10, 2010, and would aid various research initiatives, shielding experiments, as well as provide augmented production of radioisotopes for medical, industrial, and agricultural applications. As the chairman of Atomic Energy Commission, he has focused on deliveries of the major functions of the Atomic Energy Commission, that is, to organize research in atomic science in the country, to train atomic scientists in the country, to promote nuclear research in Commission's own laboratories in India, to undertake prospecting of atomic minerals in India, and to extract such minerals for use on industrial scale. In addition, Sri Vyas has ensured that India continues to participate in several national and international mega science projects like CERN, the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reaction (ITER), the Facility for Anti-Proton and Ion Research, the Square Kilometer Array, the 30-meter telescope, the laser interferometer. There's a large number of things, and under his chairmanship, India will install 12 additional nuclear plants to improve the power situation in the country. And I hope that very soon we will achieve the self-sufficiency in terms of the electricity under the chairmanship of Sri Vyas. And he has a very long list of awards, and I cannot really go through this because he also has to speak. And he is a fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineers, and he had the Indian Nuclear Society Outstanding Service Award, Homi Bhabha Science and Technology Award, and he is a 4-time DAE Award winner in the years 2007, 8, 12, and 13, so on and so forth. There are many other things. Further, he is a member in the national and international bodies like International Atomic Energy Agency. He is the chairman of Academic Council of Homi Bhabha National Institute. He is the chairman Governing Council of Tata Memorial Center and chairman and Governing Council of Center for Excellence in Basic Sciences. And as we could see that he is a technocrat at the highest level, but very, very keen to use this in academia and then bring forth the benefits of the atomic energy for the societal uses. Sir, we again thank you very much for agreeing to work with us, agreeing to give this talk for several students, and I request you to please go ahead and give your talk. Thank you very much, Professor Vyas, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind words, and thank you, Dr. Dhawan, also for inviting me for this particular talk. What I'll do is that maybe I'll try to share my screen and this one. Yeah, I have just shared my screen. Are you able to see this?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, fine. So, thank you very much. Good morning to both Dr. Dhawan and Dr. Sastry, as well as so many of other persons who are listening in. What I'll try to do is I'll try to give some idea about societal uses of atomic energy. That is the idea with which Dr. Bhabha started the complete program, and majority of the work which I am trying to say is being conducted at Bhabha Atomic Research Center, BRC, and practically all my life I have worked in BRC, excepting last few years or so. See, many a times atomic energy gets associated with some sort of fear, or some sort of because of lack of understanding of the clarity. So that is why it causes a little bit of fear. But my attempt in today's sort of presentation is just to sort of highlight the societal uses which have been put into practice, and subsequently I will be very happy to answer if there are any specific questions. So first two giants, Dr. Bhabha and Dr. Sarabhai, both of them have played a very major role in shaping the program of atomic energy in India. Other persons have also chipped in their best effort, but these are the two persons who have guided the initial part of our program. A little bit about historical background. The complete aspect related to atomic energy or nuclear energy and radioactivity started with discovery of natural radioactivity by Henry Becquerel, leftmost, in 1896, and then subsequently Henry Becquerel, Pierre Curie, who is in the middle, and Marie Curie. All three of them, they got Nobel Prize in 1903 in physics for discovery of radioactivity. To make it simple, this is a Canadian Nuclear Society website. What this is trying to show is schematically show the fission chain reaction. There is uranium-235 nucleus. If it absorbs a slow neutron, it undergoes fission. What it means is that it gets divided into two separate atoms, and subsequently about 2 to 3 neutrons are getting generated. The neutrons which are getting generated, they will have very high energy. They pass through water or any other similar lightweight material, and then it loses its energy, and then once again it reacts with another uranium-235 nucleus which is in the vicinity. So this reaction goes on, since each fission ultimately results into another fission happening. That is why it is known as fission chain reaction. In India, under the leadership of Dr. Bhabha, the work was started of making nuclear reactors, that is Apsara, which is a swimming pool type reactor, which is a 1 megawatt reactor. It was commissioned in 1956, which was immediately followed by another reactor called CIRUS. It is an acronym for Canada India Reactor for Utilities and Services. It was in collaboration with the Canadian government. It is a 40 megawatt reactor, and this is what started our activity related to nuclear research in the Department of Atomic Energy. Now, why reactors are so important? Nuclear reactors are the easiest way to produce radioisotopes. Yes, you can produce using cyclotrons also, as you would have studied as a part of your coursework also. But in cyclotrons, you have to overcome the Coulomb barrier. So you need much higher energy. And till last about 15-20 years or so, high energy, you can say cyclotrons or linear accelerators were relatively less popular. And as a result of that, nuclear reactors were the easiest way to produce radioisotopes. And radioisotopes have a large number of uses. I'll try to describe few of those uses which indicate our societal interaction as a part of atomic energy establishment. First use is medical, where one can use various isotopes for diagnostics, and you can use for therapeutic also, that is for curing as well as diagnosis. There are some uses in agriculture for crop improvement, plant uptake studies, food preservation. These are the different type of isotopes which I have written. And finally, there are some industrial uses. I will not be covering this industrial uses part of it in too much of detail. I'll try to concentrate primarily on medical and agriculture uses. And in India, we produce about 75 different type of radioisotopes. The first set of radioisotopes were started getting produced right in 1956 after Apsara became critical, and then the research started in that field. As I mentioned earlier, for medical use, it has two: diagnostic use and therapeutic use. So whenever the isotopes are removed from the reactor, they are repackaged in what is called hot cells. What you see is the person working from outside. There is a lead shielded glass which protects the person from any radioactivity, and then all the manipulation of radioisotopes, extraction of the radioisotopes takes place inside these hot cells. These radioisotopes, when they are meant for medical uses, a clinician converts it into something which is injectable. It is injected into the patient, and subsequently under gamma camera, it is the body is scanned, and what you get is an image which shows where exactly these radioisotopes have sort of accumulated, and it shows possibility of some malfunction of an organ or possibility of cancer. These are what I can call diagnostic uses. There are therapeutic uses also. If the energy of the radioisotopes is more, in that case it will be able to cure the cancer. It will be able to remove kill the cancer cells also, and then that is what is called therapeutic use. Now we go to another application where radioisotopes had been used for recharging of aquifers in Uttarakhand region. There are this shows the typical map, and it all the recharging of aquifers was tried out in two of these districts, and where it had made a lot of success in Chamoli as well as in Tehri Garhwal. It was tried out. What you see here is there is a fair amount of rainfall, but it is a hilly region, so all this water runs off, and then very soon the streams, they sort of dry up, even though there is water available in the valley region. But the villages and towns which are on the uphill side, there is a water scarcity felt, and it was found that somewhere we were successful to have about 7 times recharging. Somewhere we were not so successful. It was about 2 times the recharging. These are the numbers given for Chamoli district. So this shows typical drying up of the say local streams right in the month of October, November. The moment monsoon is over, the streams used to get dried up. Subsequently, based on the hydrological studies using radioisotopes, these type of bunds were created so that it can stop this water, and then subsequently the aquifers were getting charged. See, primarily you see this has happened because of deforestation. If there is huge forest cover, automatically water gets stopped. But otherwise, in this case, where exactly to make the bund, that is what hydrology is trying to sort of advise persons. And this is the stream that you see right in the month of February, March. You find a fair amount of water is coming. All these thing was possible. I would like to give credit to Professor Joshi, who is a professor in biosciences in Uttarakhand University. It is his effort where he allowed us to work there. He gave us all the support, and as a result of that, we could do a lot of work there. In fact, a few years back, about 8-10 years back, this water was known as BRC water, because it is BRC scientists who had given all the necessary technical help. Now I will tell you about basically the thing as to how this works. See, this is another schematic sort of arrangement of the work which was carried out in Tamil Nadu region. You see there is a, on the right hand side, there is a sea. Whatever is the freshwater aquifer, it was getting fixed with, just a second, just a second. I'm sorry for interruption. I think you can leave now. This is working very nicely. Thanks a lot. So what used to happen is that the freshwater aquifer was getting mixed with saline aquifer, and then salinity was increasing. Now, what the isotope hydrology tells you is where exactly we should make the recharge borewell. If we try to make a recharge borewell which is very near the production tube well, there is a good possibility that internally the top alluvium is not connected with the fresh water aquifer that you see at the bottom. But if you make it at a little bit distance, you will find that ultimately the freshwater aquifer is getting connected. So this is like taking a, we can say that CT scan by injecting some fluid. So same thing, naturally occurring radioisotopes are used. BRC has very good instruments available for measurement of very small quantity of radioisotopes also. And using the technology, this particular work could be done. And it has happened, it is being planned even in Telangana region, Andhra Pradesh region also, from wherever we get a request for recharging of aquifers. Now we change to another topic, which is agriculture. This is what is known as gamma irradiator, or known as gamma chamber also. We take these type of seeds. In this case, what is shown is the seeds of peanuts, groundnuts, that is. If we irradiate these seeds in this gamma chamber, and when we saw the seeds, same seeds will give you a variety of seeds back after it, once again the new crop is taken. You find a different color, different size, etc. is seen. Now, out of what it means is there is a genetic variation which is brought into the parent. This shows little more systematic two varieties. On the left hand side, what we see is the parent, and on the right hand side, what we see is the mutant variety. And mutant variety, they basically are it may be a little bit dwarfed also. It may be having bigger size of seed also. It may be having a different color of the pericarp also, and so on. Now, this shows a typical plant growth. If a seed is given no irradiation using cobalt-60 in a gamma chamber, then growth is maybe about 300 millimeter, and subsequently, based on the increase in the growth, you find that the size of the growth becomes little bit reduced. You may feel that size growth is always detrimental. It may not necessarily be the case. If you see the next example, on the left hand side, you see a rice variety called Dubraj. And on right hand side, what you see is the Dubraj mutant varieties. You see mutant is it is little bit lesser in growth. So you find the height has reduced, but maturity time has reduced, and yield has also increased. All this work was done in collaboration with Indira Gandhi Krishi Vidyalaya at Raipur. In Raipur, Dubraj is one of the rice varieties which is very extensively cultivated, and this rice variety has been released for farmers. What you see here, one of the other reason for increasing of the yield is this is relatively a taller plant. Now, supposing if the harvest is ready for reaping, there is a possibility that in case of inadvertent rain or high winds, it may have a tendency to lodge. So this is what I wanted to convey earlier, that it is not always essential that when the plant growth is slightly muted, it means inferior outcome. In this case, these plants are all erect, and then this also results into giving little bit increased amount of yield. Same way, for a fair amount of research has been carried out in West Bengal region with Bidhan Chandra Roy Krishi Vidyalay, where mustard, you find this one plant, I do not know how clear it is. The complete field has dried, but there is one plant which is remained green. So this is one mutation which has taken place, and this particular mutation would be studied whether this is agreeable or whether it gives any specific benefits or not. For groundnuts, BRC has done tremendous amount of work. This summer, there is a variety called TG39, Trombe groundnut 39, in the market yard of Rajkot. It has brought the highest, about 1501 rupees per quintal. It is the highest sort of money that has been paid so far in the market there. So these varieties are quite successful. Now, I would just like to make one clarification. This is, I would call, not genetic modification. There is gene change taking place, but when you say genetic modification, what you do is you take a gene out of the genomic sequence and try to fit in another gene which is belonging to animal kingdom or some another not really belonging to the same plant. While in genetic enhancement, I would like to say is that there are genetic changes taking place in nature. If we use radiation or atomic energy, you can enhance the speed of genetic variations which are taking place, and that is what is all about. If we, I think there is some problem. Okay, sorry. So more than 40 different varieties, to be precise, about 44 different varieties have been released so far. They are in oil seeds, namely groundnut, mustard, sunflower. There are in pulses also, udit bean, mung bean, cowpea, and so on. So very large amount of varieties have been released by BRC to the farmers of India. All these varieties have few of the features like higher yield, early maturity, disease resistance, arid compatibility, and so on. And I would like to bring it to your notice that this is a very long process. Let us say today, if I start that experiment related to gamma chamber, it gives me after the irradiation, I try to do my own field trials in BRC. After 2 or 3 generations, the field trials are found to be successful. Then we have collaboration with Agricultural University. They evaluate independently. Subsequently, ICAR also evaluates, and so on. So it is almost 7 years of total time duration before any variety is released. This is one you can say rangoli made of Dr. Bhabha using different varieties of seeds which are developed at BRC. One more major advantage of agriculture using radiation is food preservation. As it is shown in the case of potatoes, it controls sprouting, it controls infestation, it controls ripening. That is, the mangoes will not ripen early, it will get ripened after a longer duration, and it increases the shelf life of the food produces. Now, why does it do? Typically, any food item will have some pathogens. It kills the pathogens, and as a result of that, it results into food preservation. For example, infestation does not take place, or food does not get spoiled. And in addition to that, it reduces the activity of enzymes. Whenever you have, say, whenever you pluck a particular flower or fruit from the plant, already there are some enzymes which are active, and these active enzymes cause ripening of the fruit and so on. Now, when you subject it to irradiation, activity of enzyme reduces, and as a result of that, ripening rates, etc., reduce. One more work which has been done using radiation is the formation of hydrogel. Now, I must say there is nothing new about hydrogel. Hydrogel are getting formed using chemical processes since a very long time. But in this case, there is a patent by BRC where this hydrogel is made using radiation. So if you see on the left hand side small piece, it is a dried piece of hydrogel, and this is the hydrated hydrogel piece where it has practically absorbed almost 350 to 400 times its own weight of water. And when the seeds were put inside this hydrated hydrogel, we could notice that the plant growth also could take place. So that means it is not having any toxicity. Now, these trials were taken in normal plant. This is marigold plant, where a soil without any hydrogel was some plants were put in, and in another right hand side, soil was mixed with about 1% hydrogel. You find in the control the size of the flower is relatively small, while wherever we use BRC hydrogel, size of the flower is bigger. This is the pots which are showing. Left hand side is the control, right hand side is the one with hydrogel. Why does it happen? See, you see the total root growth for control is relatively less, while in case of right hand side, which is using BRC hydrogel, root growth is more. So if root growth is more, it has better water absorption capacity. It is and as a result of that, it gets more nutrients, and as a result of that, flowers are becoming bigger in size. So what are the advantages? It is large water absorbing capability, so it reduces water requirements. Biodegradable, it is biodegradable. It doesn't leave any harmful substance in the soil, and is relatively much cheaper. The same trial was carried out in arid region for tree plantation also. If you see here the date, practically 1 year back, these two plants, there were about 15-20 plants, but it shows only 2 plants here were planted. The same plants, after 1 year, you find that control, the growth is relatively less. In this case, growth is much superior, and the one with hydrogel was watered with only 50% water compared to this normal plant. So this year we are having a collaboration with Ministry of Environmental and Forest as a part of tree plantation. We are trying to give them hydrogel, and let us see whether it is the whatever success we have obtained at our facility, whether the same success we are also able to meet with. Once again, we change the topic. For waste treatment, we have sewage treatment plants. Sewage treatment plant produce the sludge, and that sludge is ultimately dried. The dried sludge is crushed, packed in boxes. It is subjected to gamma dose using cobalt-60. In that, some biofertilizer is also added, and then Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation, where the plant is made operational, they are selling this as a you can say organic manure. The advantages of doing all this step is, number one, in the dried sludge there are going to be large amount of pathogens, so all those pathogens are going to get killed. The smell is going to, foul smell is going to be practically nullified. It is going to increase the organic carbon, and then some of the toxic elements, if there are, they will also get dissociated, and as a result of that, it will be little more cleaner manure and it is the Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation plant. This is the schematic of this plant, where the dried sludge is put into the boxes, and then it takes complete turn in the irradiation plant. In the center portion is the location where cobalt-60 is going to be placed, and then subsequently it is going to come out after irradiation, and it is subjected to packing, and it is dispatched. The plant was commissioned last year, that is in February 2019, and this is the internal view of the plant. It has been working quite nicely. One more thing of waste treatment using radiation is this is a very small size, just 25,000 liters per day plant, which was installed in a textile dyeing mill in somewhere in Gujarat. What it does is, if this is the original water which is containing dye, which is a wastewater, in this case, if you pass through this particular plant, all the dye gets absorbed, and then finally you get absolutely clean water, which is without any traces of dye. It has undergone about 6 months of continuous trial, and another plants are also getting made, and then we are giving it for trials at some of other industrial locations also. Now it contains these two. These are the two typical cartridges which are shown. They are basically cotton, which is you can say which is dipped in some of the resins which is developed by BRC, and then subsequently it is subjected to irradiation, it gets activated, and as a result of that, it gets the capability to absorb this dye. Now there are very large number of such topics, but I would practically stop here. Just a few last words. Most of the time we are worried about irradiation, because radiation is something which is not seen. Infrared light you can see to some extent, but then this radiation which is high energy we do not see, and that is why we are afraid of this. Typically radiation consists of alpha particles, which is nothing but helium nucleus, gamma, which is nothing but photons, and then another particles like proton, beta, neutrons, and so on. If you see alpha particles, just a thin sheet of paper is good enough to stop. Beta particles, you can say something which is thickness of hand, it is good enough. And for gamma, which is highly penetrating, we use concrete. So I would like to once again submit to all of you that radioactivity is present all around us. We should not be afraid of it. In any nuclear facility, be it reactor plant or a hospital where we often go for treatment, adequate care is taken to ensure that nobody, including worker as well as the persons who are coming as a visitor, do not get undesirable radiation dose. Another set of last words. These are the giants of nuclear sciences and atomic energy. First three I have already mentioned. Henry Becquerel in the middle, Marie Curie and Pierre Curie by the side of him. Nobel Prize in 1903. Then Ernest Rutherford, Nobel Prize in 1908 for you can say chemistry of radioactive materials. Below him is James Chadwick for discovery of neutrons, Nobel Prize in 1935. In 1932, neutron was discovered. Immediately, I jumped to Enrico Fermi, another great scientist. Usually in science, what happens? Sometimes you are good in theory, sometimes you are good in experiment, but it is very rare to find people who are equally good in theory as well as experiment. Enrico Fermi was one very rare person who was brilliant in both this field, and he got Nobel Prize for artificially formed radioactive elements in 1938. Then 1944, Otto Hahn for discovery of fission. Last one I come to Professor Albert Einstein. He did not get in, you can say, sort of nuclear field. He got for photoelectric effect, but E is equal to mc square. it is that equation which was thanks to Professor Albert Einstein. And then finally we come back to Marie Curie, the first lady to have got Nobel Prize, the first lady, the only lady to have got Nobel Prize twice, and the only person to get Nobel Prize in two separate fields of science. First she got with Henry Becquerel in physics, and then later on in chemistry in 1911. And I think the family must be great. She had, they had both Pierre Curie and Marie Curie had two daughters. Both of them also got Nobel Prizes. So in a family of 4, they had 5 Nobel Prizes among them. Must be a great family. With this, I would stop here. Thank you very much. Jai Hind. What you see at the bottom is the photograph of BRC. This is one of the finest research center in Department of Atomic Energy and possibly in India as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vyasji. This was a very wonderful experience that you laid so much emphasis on the fundamentals and the fundamental principles of nuclear energy, quantum mechanics, and all other combining both experiment and theory, and more importantly, the real life applications in fields which many people might not be conceiving, is very clearly laid out. And I would like to tell you that we are sort of having a stream of questions, a large number of questions. May I request you whether it will be possible for you to take these questions?
Yes, please. I will. I would certainly like to.
So, before I ask my younger colleagues, these 2 dynamic students are there. They will take this question answer session. And before that, Alok Dhawan, I request him to make his remarks before Lisa and Monty can take the question answers.
So I think Vyasji has given us a wonderful exposition of what atomic energy is all about and its safe uses for humans. And I think I'm very impressed because coming from an Institute of Toxicology, I can see a direct use of the application of atomic science, especially when you talk about industry that are using dyes in the effluents at times. So I think that was a direct application that I'm really happy with. And the other one, of course, is in the plants where you've shown a fantastic amount of and of course in the when you look at manure that is getting cleaned up using the atomic energy. I mean, we do have someone close by Lucknow, and he was looking at how to convert this manure for agriculture, and they were finding a lot of pesticides and heavy metals that are still in that manure. So I think it's a wonderful exposition of how this technology can be used for the betterment of common man, and how essentially we are looking at building more confidence in common man for the use of this radioactivity. And I'm really impressed with the kind of work that you have showed today from the department. Must thank you profusely, because I think this is the kind of work that the students would love to see, that on the one hand they feel always afraid of radioactivity, on the other side, right from agriculture to increasing the farmer's income, as you very rightly showed, that for peanuts there's a maximum that they could ever get. So I think it's a fantastic lecture that you've given us, and we've all become very, very enlightened. So I must thank you on that behalf. And I think the students are ready with their questions, so I'll hand it over to the students to take it forward.
Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of our director and staff, I'd like to say that we are very thankful for your fantastic lecture, and it was really a great honor for us to listen to you, sir. And there are lots of appreciation in MS Team, YouTube and Facebook, and along with lots of questions. So we would just like to put forward few questions for you. The most common question that many people have asked is that if consumption of mutant foods produced using radiation in agriculture safe for human consumption, and will it not cause cancer and affect fertility of the land?
Typically, this food, when it is subjected to irradiation, the radiation passes through and through from the food. So what happens is there is no residual radioactivity left inside the food. So that is one thing. So if I consume it, I will not be consuming any amount of radioactivity. Second thing is, these aspects are studied in great detail by international organizations like FAO and many other institutes also, to see what is the safe limit for irradiation, which is not causing any harm to the vitamins or the say nutrients which are there in the food. So radiation level is much lower then what it would cause the degradation of the basic, you can say, nutritional properties of the food. In fact, there are large number of food items which are irradiated, and since people have fear of this radiation, deliberately the irradiated food is not labeled. Otherwise, there is a good possibility you may be picking up some food items which is say imported, or which is say containing meat products, etc. There is a good possibility it may not have it may not be displaying the radiation, but it may still be irradiated, and it has been established as a part of international. There is an international consensus that this is perfectly safe. Yes, please.
What will be the future of Indian radioisotope production?
Yeah, I will mute my mic and.
No, sir, it's on their part, so don't have to worry. Yeah, go ahead.
What will be the future of Indian radioisotope production for the medical uses?
As of now, medical isotopes are produced in primarily one reactor, which is Dhruva reactor. A fair amount of sort of radioisotopes are imported as well, because to tell you frankly, we are not able to meet the requirements. But recently, the finance minister has announced that the department will set up one additional nuclear reactor exclusively meant for the radioisotopes for medical uses. And as a result of that, we will be in a position to now, maybe after about 4 or 5 years or so, it will be one of the largest reactor in the world for radioisotope production. And we hope that we will be able to meet all the requirements of India. I do not know. Maybe if you can tell both your names, then I will, as I finish, I will say over to you.
Okay. Sure, sir. Myself, Lisamoni Kolita. I am a senior research fellow of CSIR NIST.
Okay.
I am Monty.
No, your voice broke, but okay, I'll say over to you. Fine.
Okay, sir. So, sir, the next question is how to decide that which particular change will occur in DNA while irradiating with isotope that will result in desired effects in any particular crop?
Use of radiation for genetic enhancement is very much random in nature. What I try to do is, I would like to give an example. Let us say I am in a dark room and with an air gun, and there are say maybe 15-20 balloons, and then I am just taking a shot at that. There is a possibility that I may exhaust all my bullets and not a single balloon will get broken. So the changes which may happen in the genetic structure of that particular say seed, it is going to be a totally random process. And what our researcher have to do is, they will plant all those seeds which have been irradiated. Out of that, maybe 10% of the seeds will show some variation. Out of that, there could be only one seed variety or one seed which will have changes which are positive in nature, which is what we are looking for. For example, in groundnut, we would be interested in having higher oil content in the, or having a larger seed size, and so on. So this is relatively an unsystematic study of you can say sort of research in agricultural sciences. Subsequently, in last 5 to 10 years, we have tried to do sort of study of the parent as well as mutant genes, and try to see which is the gene which has changed in the mutant, and then we are able to correlate as to, okay, this is the gene responsible for oil content, this is the gene responsible for dwarfness in the plant, and so on. So there is an institute called National Center for Bioscience, NCBS, at Bangalore. BRC and NCBS has a collaboration in which this study is taking place. Over to you.
So the next question is from Ayush Lepcha. Being aware of about the environmental threats due to the improper dumping of radioactive waste, would you like to suggest effective method to address this issue?
See, I will tell you, radioactive waste generally is not dumped indiscriminately. In India, we have Atomic Energy Regulatory Board, who, in collaboration with State Pollution Control Board, they define the method by which the waste has to be treated and waste has to be stored. So I would personally feel that there may be an isolated case somewhere, but in our opinion, the Uranium Corporation of India Limited, which is really doing mining of uranium, there is no indiscriminate dumping of waste. The waste ponds which are made, they are lined with clays and multiple layers, so that even groundwater contamination does not take place. I would just like to tell here one thing. Many a times what happens is, when you when you go very deep and the water table keeps on reducing further and further, water becomes acidic because of reaction with atmospheric oxygen. And as a result of that, the rock which is containing uranium, it may start getting leached into water. For example, in Punjab, there are some cases where groundwater is showing little high amount of uranium. It was reported in newspapers also. But this is more, there are no uranium mines there. There are no reactor plants also there. But then still you could find some little higher value of uranium in water. So this is because of, I would say, very complex phenomenon which is taking place in geology, the type of structure of rock that is there, and type of nature of water which is there. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. So the next question is from Priyanka Gupta. She is asking, can we also increase the quality of crop by mutagenesis rather than increasing consumption only?
See, basically, the one example which I showed for this rice, which is a mutant Dubraj mutant variety, there the yield has increased. So per acre, the farmer is able to get better yield. So I am not able to possibly gauge the question properly. It is, I'm not telling about that consumption part of it. The ICAR also will accept a particular variety only if it is superior than the existing variety. Otherwise, ICAR would not like to sort of introduce a new variety which is not sort of having any specific advantages. So whatever varieties, if they are at all getting accepted for release within India, that is going beyond research thing, it is only if there is a increased yield, that is per acre, if the farmer is able to get better yield. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is from Pooja Uniyar. If dye is carcinogenic, will that be adsorbed too, and will water be portable afterwards?
The dye is going to get, I will like to make one clarification here. There are two types of dyes used, one for cotton clothes, which is ionically charged, and another dye which is of for synthetic or polyester, which is not really having any charges. So in this case, our you can say our technology is successful for cotton dyes, and all the complete dye removal takes place. We are working out the procedure, or trying to work out on working out newer resins which can take away the polyester dye or synthetic cloth dye also. So even if it is carcinogenic, the dye is going to get adsorbed. One more thing is, the water looks pure, it is only clean of dye, but still its COD and BOD requirements are quite large, so it is not going to be potable. At least it can be recycled in the same process of dyeing. So this is not a potable water, even though it looks so very clean. Over to you.
Sir, we will be asking one last question. Sir, is there any side effects of ejecting radioisotopes?
No, in reality, no, because the quantity which is injected is relatively very, very minute. And that too, it is injected for curing some of the diseases or for some investigations. So yes, radioactivity can have side effects or negative effects, but there are some sort of threshold value below which it does not have any negative side effect left in the within the body. So and the dosages are also decided in such a way that it will not have any side effect. So if it is medically administered by an oncologist, in that case it is not going to have any side effects whatsoever.
Actually, sir, there are a lot of questions and we are getting the questions like most of the time. So like we'll continue with the question answer session. If
ask his permission.
Sir, if you would like to proceed, sir.
Maybe for another 5 to 7 minutes, and then you can decide which should be the last question.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Maybe I can.
The next
we can leave it to Dr. Sastry, which should be the last question. So it is about 12 o'clock. Maybe up to 12:10, we can have the interaction.
Yeah.
Sure, sir. So the question is from Vinay. What is the percentage completion of 3-stage nuclear program?
See, basically, we have just reached beginning of second stage. First stage was using pressurized heavy water reactor. We have about 20 reactors which are in operation, which are heavy water reactor. From heavy water reactor, the plutonium is used and then it is put into fast reactor, which is what is called breeder reactor also. So fast reactors, so far the prototype fast breeder reactor, which is of large size, about 500 megawatt electric capacity, has not been commissioned. So we can say we are at the beginning of second stage. The third stage involves using uranium-233 and making reactor out of that. We have taken, you can say, completed the cycle part of it. That is, we know how to irradiate thorium. We know how to take uranium-233 out of that and then put it back into the reactor. But a very small research reactor called Kamini reactor is operational at Kalpakam. So that way, you can say, so far as technology is concerned, for third stage, we have taken one step. But when it comes to real start of second stage and third stage, we are yet to start.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a wonderful thing, and the range of questions that people are asking is very, very good, all the way from basic physics to biology to agriculture to medicine. And one thing, current line of thinking is, what is the future in about 1 decade as far as the atomic energy applications in our country are concerned? Is it possible for us to see atomic energy as a strategic point to achieve the self-reliance, or the so-called Honorable Prime Minister's Atmanirbharata? If you can summarize that, that will be great.
Basically, what you are hinting at is the generation of electricity with about 21 total reactors. India is having the 7th largest fleet of number of reactors all over the world. But in initial period, all our reactor capacity was about 220 megawatt. So total electricity generation because of nuclear power station is really very, very small. It is just about 3% or 2.8 to 3% or so. It is even little less than 3%. So the contribution to the total grid from nuclear energy is very small. But at this stage, I would like to say that India was totally indigenous when it comes to making of the nuclear reactors is concerned. There are embargoes on India for import of any nuclear technology. Many equipments also we do not get. So when it comes to nuclear technology, India is, when it comes to pressurized heavy water reactors, India is fully self-sufficient. Now, government has given us a directive few years back to make 700 megawatt power stations in a fleet mode, so that the reactors can be built relatively fast. Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, which is the agency which is responsible for making a nuclear power station, they are making efforts. They are sort of getting all the clearances from environmental clearances and so on. So that way, DRC, Department of Atomic Energy and NPCIL in particular is making strides. Let us see where we reach. Right now, the country is passing through relatively a very bad period. Not just our country, the whole world is also passing. It is going to cause some disturbance in the planning, but we are hopeful that we will be able to come out of it very soon, and we'll be able to start the work related to nuclear power plant construction. One thing I would like to mention here is nuclear power is the cleanest sort of source of energy, which is as a part of base load. Solar energy is definitely clean, no doubt about it. Its investment is also relatively very small compared to nuclear power station, but it is not available, for example, during night time. During some of the season, it may not be so very reliably available. So for base load industrial requirement, nuclear power is definitely an alternative, as it is clean compared to thermal power station or coal-based power stations. Over to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Because we will definitely be able to achieve higher levels of capacity building with nuclear power. But not only that, the applications, whether it is in agriculture or radiology, in cancer and other diseases treatment, and also the basic structural biology aspect and solving the structure of molecules, and then fundamental research, whether it is in physics or chemistry or biology, we will be very, very fortunate to have a BARC which takes the training school of BARC, attract the best talent in the country, and hopefully this will be utilizing these concepts for the multifaceted development of our country. And about close to 2,000 people were there at some point of time in this lecture, and your lecture will also be available on YouTube. And on behalf of all of them, I would like to request Dr. Lakhi Saikia to give the vote of thanks. Lakhi.
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, on behalf of Director CSI NIST, Dr. G. Narahari Sastry, and the whole family of CSI NIST, and all from the Summer Research Training Program team, offer our sincere thanks and gratitude to KNPS sir for accepting our invitation to deliver the eminent scientist lecture in our SRTP program today. Thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful and very much informative talk, which will definitely, help our participants and us also to know much better the role of nuclear energy, radioactivity in the, all sorts of life, starting from agriculture to water treatment. So definitely, sir, we are very much thankful to you, and we hope that we will again, in future listen your talk. And I would also like to thank Dr. Alok Dhawan, Director CSIR IITR Lucknow, for his kind support, help, and cooperation in coordinating the lecture today, and his support for the whole SRTP program. We sincerely thank Dhawan sir. Our sincere thanks goes to our Honorable Director, CSI NIST, Dr. G. Narahari Sastry, for all sorts of support, guidance, motivation. Overall, coordinating this SRTP program, which is a pan-India program, and students from Jammu Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and from west part of India to the eastern part of India, this particularly northeast to Arunachal, all students are here, and definitely from bottom of our heart we are thanking him, and thanks to Lisa, Monty, and Rajiv for their support. We appreciate each and everyone associated with this program for successfully coordinating this lecture today. Last but not the least, thanks to all the participants of SRTP for joining this lecture. So thank you everyone. Jai Hind. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again from our side. Namaskar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Dr. Dhawan and Dr. Sastry and Dr. Saikia, and two young ladies who sort of took the questions and then conveyed to me. Sorry, I could not get their name perfectly because there was some audio.
They are Lisa Moni Kalita and Monty Gogoi.
Achha, Monty and Lisa Moni. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Goodbye. And I do not know if you are not live. I would just like to make a couple of comments.
Just stop the live and then we can.
We will stop the live just a minute.